Story number one. I'm a private duty nurse and work mostly taking and giving care to patients at their homes, meaning encountering anything and everything. This happened about 6 months ago, but I haven't been able to shake it. I've seen a lot in the past few years, but this is the first time I wondered if something from the other side was actually real. I had been assigned to a new patient, but the location of the house was sort of creepy. A stranded house in the middle of nowhere with a comatose patient. It should have been easy since I had done this before, but something about this new duty felt off. At first it was easy, nothing out of the blue. I thought that maybe my paranoia had acted, but then, after a week, one night, it was raining heavily with thunderstorms. The house was unusually silent, the kind of hush that amplified every beep and sigh. I had a very hectic day, and by now I was overly exhausted. It was around 2 a.m. when I thought that I might have slept while keeping a watch on the patient. The fatigue had clearly taken a toll, but I wasn't expecting what was going to happen in the next few hours. I woke up to a sudden shrill sound, most probably due to the thunderstorm, but what I saw sent shivers down my spine. The patient looked directly at me, his eyes lifeless, boring into me. For a moment I got a jump scare, rubbing my eyes. But when I looked back, the patient was sleeping as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't been watching me, staring at my soul. I reminded myself that he was a comatose patient, but the stare felt too real. It was around 3:15 a.m. when I heard a clear and loud voice of glass shattering. It freaked me out a lot, given that the situation was already creepy. I mustered up the courage and went down to check, only to find a glass shattered on the floor. I glanced around and found a window open in the kitchen. That was unusual because I remembered checking all the windows and doors and locking them. Strong, chilly winds blew, making the temperature drop significantly. I picked up the glass pieces, cleaned the kitchen, and closed the window, locking it once again. Just as I was about to go, I felt as if someone was watching me from outside the window. Upon checking the window, I found nothing, and in this case, no one. I thought my mind had been playing tricks. I went to the bathroom to wash my face. My mind had been clearly fogged, making me see things that didn't exist. But that is when something beyond explanation happened. I was washing my face, and for a brief moment, maybe a few seconds, I saw a vivid, clear reflection of the same comatose patient I was taking care of. The question was how it was possible when he had been in a coma. Instantly, I looked back only to find an empty corridor with only a few dim lights on. My mind was unable to process any of it because things were okay a week before, and now, things were weird, but I decided to go up and check if the patient had been down, a logical part of me telling me it wasn't possible to happen. If this wasn't enough, I swear I saw a dark figure standing at the very top of the stairs looking at me. I froze, not able to move. It was as if one wrong move and the next, the shadow would be just in front of me. For a fleeting second, it felt as if this was going to happen. But in the blink of an eye, the shadow was gone, disappeared as if vanishing into thin air. I stood there for a few minutes, calming the very heart that was nearly on the verge of popping out of my body a few minutes ago. I hesitantly went up, glancing over my shoulder every now and then until I reached the room. It was now 4:44 a.m., and just as I entered, I saw the patient lying with his eyes closed, in the same position he had been before I went down. But the spoon that was kept on his bedside had now fallen to the ground. I looked at the spoon and then at the patient, but nothing. No movement, no action. The room had no windows, therefore it couldn't have been the wind. There was no one except me and the patient. There was no reason as to how the spoon fell, and whether what I had been experiencing made sense or not. The next morning, I called my supervisor and told her that I was quitting the job. It was too much to rationalize. Maybe it's all in my head. But I know what I saw, and I know that the images of that night are still fresh, haunting me sometimes. Story number 2. This happened about 5 years ago, but it's as razor sharp in my memory as if it happened last night. Sometimes I remember it in a flash, goosebumps and all, prickling my skin. It was the kind of night shift where whatever happened in the unit would somehow echo in my mind. I am a nurse, and it was my normal shift day. I had been going to the cafeteria for a coffee when my coworker on the radio told me some work needed my assistance. It was 3 a.m., and the work was in the morgue. Yes, I know it's scary, but what could happen? This is what I thought when I went inside. The air conditioner was blasting, freezing, and leaving cold smoke. I decided to finish my work as soon as possible because the cold inside was unbearable. Just as I started walking, I heard a faint knock and then, almost in an inaudible tone, a whisper asking me for help. That was strange. Dead people couldn't talk, let alone whisper. I thought that maybe there was someone else as I asked, calling if anyone was there. But silence. Long stretched silence. No one. I thought that it would have been better to get my coffee, because now I was hearing things in a morgue. And then, I saw someone moving along the smoke. Didn't see the face, just a faint shadow, but it was enough to creep me out. I called out, just needing to confirm if there was anyone. But again, silence. It was starting to get eerie. I resumed my work, but this time my heart was already pulsing, beating faster and faster. It was around 3:30 a.m. when I heard a loud bang from one of the boxes, as if someone alive had been there. This made me freeze in my tracks. Just as I was trying to process, the banging came again. My instincts told me to run, leave the place as soon as I could. And still, there I was following the noise as if curiosity had overwhelmed me. Just as I was near to where the sound was coming from, it stopped. I waited for it to happen again, but it didn't. I had just turned around when it started again. Completely frozen, my heart was now thudding hard. With small steps, I turned around and went to the box where the sound was coming from. My hands were trembling as I opened the box, only to find a dead body. I looked at it for a moment as if it would suddenly pop back to life, but it didn't. The body was pale, and just as I was closing the box for a second, I thought that the body moved. Maybe it was sleep deprivation, but the small, subtle movement was fresh flashing in my mind as I walked back to complete my work. While going back, I felt as if someone ran behind me, staring at me with cold eyes. I turned around but found no one. Something was not right about the room, and then I felt as if someone tugged at my clothes. Without another thought, I ran outside as fast as I could. The next day, I told my coworker about what had happened to me in the morgue with a pale face. The next thing I heard left me in utter shock. She told me that she never asked me for any assistance, definitely not in the morgue. Told me that she didn't have the radio and was, in fact, waiting for me at the cafeteria. That left me speechless. I had no idea what to think. From that moment, I have never gone near the morgue. Every time I see that room, I remember that night. I tell myself I believe in science, and still, when they say the dead don't linger, I wonder if maybe, just for one last, insistent moment, they do. Story number 3. About 3 years ago, during a hellish shift in the ER, I experienced something which can't be described, not rationally. I've worked as an ER nurse while encountering accidents, deaths, and attacks. But this one was different, and I still get goosebumps every time I think about it. It was just after 2:30 a.m. when they brought a man in his 30s. Unlike the drunk drivers and overdose victims, this guy looked healthy, almost glowing with life, even as he fought for it. I won't bore you with the clinical details, but it was an ugly case. His heart had just stopped, and we worked on him. Everyone wanted to stop 10 minutes before, but no one said it aloud. Maybe it was how young he was. But we finally called it. Time of death, 3:17 a.m. That's routine. The scrubbing work that comes after is not glamorous, but someone has to do it. That night, the duty was given to me. The trauma room was still and bright when I entered, its white lights reflecting off the steel. I was doing my work, and when I heard it, a sound, sudden, as if a breath drawn in, and then a long, deep sigh. It was so distinct, I stopped mid-motion. I spun, scanning the tiny room. There's a little room for medical supplies, but I'd just seen it empty. Anyone who's worked the nights in an ER knows the kinds of sounds you get used to. Groans, carts rolling down the hall. But this was different. It sounded very much like relief, like the gasp you take after surfacing from a long dive, or the first breath after you've been crying. I knew I was alone. Logically, knew. In my 5 years, I've seen enough weird cases to trust my senses, but every hair on my arms lifted. I stood still a moment. The only things moving were the wall monitor cables dangling off, swaying a little from where I'd bumped them. That's when the heart monitor beeped. It was still plugged in, sure, but the monitor had been off. Not powered down, just in standby. It was a familiar beep, the high, shrill tone it made when it detected any heartbeat. A sound that wasn't possible, but I had heard it, loud and clear, tensing up my body. One beep, loud, urgent. I froze. Trick of a loose wire? Surely, I'd bumped them after all. But then again, beep, pause, beep, pause. It was out of rhythm. I looked at the monitor. The screen was black, but the green on light was faintly glowing. By now, every instinct, to be professional, to finish the damn cleanup, were replaced with something uneasy, as in my inner thoughts told me to leave the room as soon as possible. Just as I was about to turn and leave, I heard a whisper, as if someone begged me to save them. I had no courage to look back, but when I turned, I saw a shadow by the window. No, it wasn't possible. It was just me thinking too much, that's what I thought. But then, the room was filled with a spooky vibe. It was as if someone existed by my side, but was not visible to me. I didn't get scared easily, but this time I couldn't move. There was still the sense, as if there was someone else beside me in the room. I felt that another presence. I wish I could be more rational, say I'd heard cleaning staff outside, or that my eyes played tricks on me in the harsh fluorescence. But I'd closed the door. No way the outside voices could be heard inside. The linoleum, half wiped, stuck slightly to my shoes. In a sudden, defiant burst, I said out loud, asking to stop the person who was playing tricks on me. Now was not the time. I was already tired, and this was worse than any ER case. I felt silly, but the need to fill the silence, to prove I was alone, overtook me. Just as I tried to open the door, it didn't open. I tried hard, using my full force, but it was as if someone had locked me inside the room. I felt that someone was now standing behind me, the shadow visible on the floor, and then I heard a quick shuffle behind me, a shoe scuff maybe? But when I whirled around, there was nothing. The monitor gave one last beep, then fell silent. The green light died. I found myself breathing like I'd run a mile, cold sweat beading on my brow. There was nothing more I could do, and then blackness consumed me as I fainted. The next day in morning, I asked my supervisor as she told me that I had fainted in the trauma room. I told her about last night's incident, and she walked off laughing, telling me that I was just making excuses for not completing the work. Before going, she had handed me a patient chart. For the rest of my other shifts, I didn't go near the trauma room. I've never told anyone else at work about that night, but sometimes I still remember the sound of that long, relieved sigh. The monitor beeping, flashing as if it was still too vivid and real to forget. And after that day, I have never worked in the trauma room alone. Not anymore. Story number 4. This happened about 2 weeks ago, and to be honest, it's been sitting heavy with me since. I've been a nurse, watching plenty of night shifts, plenty of odd little coincidences. I never paid much attention to any of it, not until this. I work in a small community hospital on the surgical floor. Our ward wasn't huge, but it wasn't creepy either. A couple of weeks ago, we admitted a man in his late 60s for a routine surgery. The operation went smoothly, but recovery was rougher. He was slow to come out from the anesthesia and was on some pretty hefty pain meds at first. Not enough to cause hallucinations, but enough to leave him groggy and a little confused. On his first post-op night, I was on the night shift. Around 10 p.m. during my first check, he seemed to be slightly sedated. Just as I was leaving after checking him, he asked me about a woman standing in a red dress in the corner. I thought he might have been referring to something on TV, but the TV was off. I asked, confused, when he nodded toward the empty corner by the window. A woman standing in a red dress, just standing. I smiled and waved his claims off. He frowned, still looking past me, and didn't reply. I assumed it was the sedatives talking. The next few checks, same thing. I'd walk in and he'd look anxiously, or sometimes just curiously, past my shoulder saying the same thing. After hearing these 3 or 4 times, I made the routine jokes with my colleagues at the nurse's station about my special visitor. This went on for 2 nights, never any movement from his visitor. Eventually, the old man stopped mentioning her. He was transferred to outpatient recovery, and the room got cleaned and prepped for the next admission. I chalked it up to confusion and the power of suggestion. Maybe he'd seen something read out the window or in a half-dream. A few days later, a new patient was assigned to that same room. A woman about 40 in for an overnight stay after a minor procedure. She was sharp, fully lucid, and had no memory issues. She'd been chatty and cheerful the whole evening. By 2 a.m., the floor was mostly quiet. I did my rounds, and that's when I had a scream, coming from the same room. I ran toward the room, thoughts spiraling as to what could have happened. But after reaching, when I went inside, I saw the woman sleeping soundly. Seems like she had been sleeping for more than 4 hours. I looked around the room, and that's when I noticed the corner. The same corner where the man had pointed. The corner looked weirdly creepy, all dark. I tried to switch on the light, but the light wasn't working. This was odd because all the other lights in the room were working fine. I turned around only to see that the woman had woken up and was looking at me as if someone was standing behind me. I blinked, then shook my head. I asked her if she needed anything, but she told me that there was a lady in a red dress standing behind me, looking at her. Confusion messed my mind. How was it possible that 2 different people, pretty much as strangers to each other, had mentioned the same thing? Plus, how could they see a woman in red when the color of our hospital scrubs was blue? I turned around only to find nothing but emptiness. There was no one else in the room. I looked toward the door, closed. I told her that it was the fatigue acting, and after she slept, the weird feeling of someone else present in the room crept up inside me. The next day, I had the maintenance people check on the light when they told me that there was nothing wrong in the first place, and all the lights were working fine, the corner one as well. This was slowly messing with me. I had no reason as to how such things were happening. It was night again, me on my usual shift, but this time, I saw someone walking in that woman's room. It was pretty late, and the woman was admitted alone. It was beyond meeting hours, and so I decided to check. The room was empty, the woman sleeping, but the light in the corner wasn't working. I had it checked in the morning, and it was fine. But now, just as I was looking at the room, I felt a sudden chill in the room, as if someone had just come in and stood behind me. My feet were numb, and I looked sideways in the window. The reflection of a woman in a red dress. It felt as if I had been paralyzed, but I turned around and for a second saw a flash of red. But then, nothing. There was no one. I knew that my eyes had seen the brief flash of red before it disappeared, as if swept away by the wind. With hesitant steps, I went towards the corner, but found nothing. I felt a cold little spark of fear in my spine as I remembered the old man's identical description of the same woman, same spot, just standing here, never moving or speaking. The next day, I asked housekeeping about it. They just shrugged, saying they'd never seen anyone in red. But one did mention she always felt weirdly cold when in that room, especially at night. I didn't want to jump to wild conclusions, but rational explanations or not, I didn't go in that room anymore at night without turning on every damn light. I still haven't been able to figure out if it was a shared hallucination or if something else was actually happening in that room. I'm not sure I ever want to know. I just wanted to get this off my chest because honestly, the memory of their voices, their certainty, still gives me chills. And if you ever wind up in a hospital and see someone in a red dress standing silent by your bed, you might want to ask for a transfer. I sure as hell would. Story number 5. I'm a nurse and I am an intern, doing night shifts at a small hospice unit. The place is about 50 years old. The quietness at night somehow feels heavier. We have 6 patient rooms on the unit and each has a bell system so they can ring for help. Nothing fancy, just basic push-button bells with old wiring that sometimes has a mind of its own. A few weeks ago, I was working an overnight shift. My coworker called out, so it was just me and the rest of the building. I was on rounds, sleepy but alert, and things were at least calm. Around 2 in the morning, the bell in room 3 went off. Just a sharp voice from the speaker at the nurse station, with the old red light over the door blinking. It was strange because room 3 was empty. The woman who had been in there had just passed at around 9 that night. Her family came, paid their respects, and the orderly took her body down to the morgue at about 10. The room was cleaned, everything stripped and wiped down. The lights were off and the door closed when I walked past at midnight. But now, 2 hours later, I was staring at that blinking light and listening to the bell echo in my brain. I reminded myself that maybe it was a glitch as I walked down the hall, half expecting to find a new patient, somehow teleported into the bed instead. Somehow, there was a patient, a man. It felt odd because the room was supposed to be empty, but then I thought that maybe someone had been shifted. Everything was fine, except that the patient was sleeping. I checked for any medical issues or complications, but the patient seemed absolutely fine, stable. I checked the bell unit next to the bed, thinking maybe that the cleaning crew had nudged the call button, but the button wasn't even hanging loose. It was clipped, out of reach from anyone who might be lying in the bed. Still, I pressed it a few times, checking if it was sticking or glitching. Nothing happened. I instantly thought that it was an issue of faulty wiring. The system was old. I got out my little flashlight and checked under the bed, under the nightstand, and even opened the box on the wall without disturbing the patient. But everything looked as it should. I tried to laugh it off, but the room felt off in a way I couldn't quite describe. It was too cold, even though the hallway outside was stuffy. The shadows in the corners seemed just a little too thick. I went back to the station, scribbled a note in the repair log, and told myself to forget it. At 2:30 a.m., the bell rang again, same room. This time I just sat there for a second listening, heart thudding. I almost ignored it, but if there's one thing I know as a nurse, it's that you check on alarms. You always check. I went back. The patient was still sleeping. I was fully freaked by now, but still with the mustered courage, I asked the patient if he needed anything. I think he was high on sedatives because he didn't answer, and there was no one else except for me in his room. My voice sounded way too loud in that tiny room, but nothing came, obviously. No movement, no response. I finally texted my friend who'd worked the earlier part of the shift. I told her what was going on. My friend messaged back almost immediately, which was weird for her at that hour. She told me that it happened every time after someone had died in that room. That stopped me cold. I sat there for a while with that text on my phone, replaying all the nights I covered in room 3. I don't know why, but that knowledge made everything feel worse. Like the weirdness wasn't just in my head. The bell rang at 3:05, and then nothing. The rest of the shift was uneventful, but I slept uneasily the next morning. When I came in the following night, I told myself I'd stay rational. I even had the repair guy check the system at the start of the shift. He found nothing wrong at all, no shorts, no loose wires, no evidence of tampering. Still, at 1:45 a.m., the bell in room 3 rang again. I entered the room, but instead of freezing at the door, I forced myself to move around, switching on the fluorescence and standing right where the bed had been. But the patient was a lady. I had checked it for myself. It was a man yesterday and now a lady. Something didn't fit right at all. For a second, it felt like someone was watching me. I stood there quietly, not daring to move or make any sound, and after a while, the room felt warmer. The bell didn't ring again that night. The next day, I asked the senior doctor if there was anything wrong in room 3 or if the patients had changed. The doctor was shocked and then, almost in a dropped voice, told me that room 3 had been empty for more than 3 days. The last patient in that room had died 3 days ago, and the room had been empty since then. I told him that I had seen 2 different patients, but he looked pale. I checked about the same with a few other coworkers as well, telling me that the room had been empty. This gave me shivers. I never went inside room 3 after this incident, but every time I hear that bell now, I get the same chill. And every time, I remind myself, I'm not alone, not in the way I thought.